So interdependence is the opposite of codependence. Codependence is where one person is taking full responsibility for the other person and ceasing to be a whole person as a result. So they're trying to make so much space for this person's feelings that they hide their feelings. They are trying to care for this person's needs so much so that they don't show up with their needs in the relationship. They cater to this person's thoughts and opinions and suppress their own. The other person just benefits from all of the hard work of this individual. And so what we need is, so that's codependence. The other is isolation, where each person is their own island and doesn't need the other. What we want is healthy interdependence. And this is where both people are showing up as their whole selves with their thoughts and their feelings and their preferences and their personalities and their perspectives and their needs, their limitations, and not expecting the other person to agree or to get on the same page as them, being comfortable with differences, comfortable with differences, right? And making space for them. And each person is leaning on the other and also supporting the other. And so both are able to have needs. Both are able to have opinions. And there's a lot of collaboration and cooperation. And through the relationship, both are being changed, right? Like they're influencing each other. Yeah. Okay. So those are the things that are some of the things that are required for a relationship. If we're supposed to be in relationship with God, and if not all of those things have been villainized, treated with suspicion, called dangerous in our religious backgrounds, then have we really been taught to have a relationship with God? Or does our relationship look like those examples I gave at the beginning, where, the wife, she does the laundry, she cooks the meals, she speaks well of the husband, she has sex with him, and she raises his kids. That's a relationship, right? No, those things may be present. They're not necessary for a relationship, but they may be present in a relationship. The things that are necessary for a relationship are these things: emotions, differentiation, conflict and repair, the ability to make mistakes, interdependence, and freedom. So now I want to get granular and I want to look at our relationship with God. If you experience hurt in your relationship with God, and this may come from reading the Bible, this may come from experiencing harm at the hands of someone else who claims to follow God, or this may come from experiencing suffering and knowing that God is sovereign. And so, why isn't he protecting you? Why isn't he answering your prayers? All of those things. Whatever it is, if you have experienced hurt, anger, sadness in your relationship with God, how have you responded to it? So there are two main responses to experiencing pain in any relationship. The first one is it was where you say, I need this to be okay. I cannot deal with this relationship breaking right now. And so I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it okay. So there's a number of things you might do. One of them is you might suppress, like, I can't, there's no space for these emotions. I can't deal with them right now. I need everything to be okay. So I'm just going to repress my hurt, my anger, my sadness, whatever it is. I'm just not going to deal with it. That's one. Another one might be, you might justify it and be like, oh, well, I probably deserved it, or I have a lesson I need to learn, or, whatever. In some way, we are justifying, almost like lawyering for God to ourselves, right? He hasn't said or done anything. Like, we haven't asked him to justify it for himself, but we're just going to justify it for him. Another thing is we might gaslight ourselves. We might be like, well, I'm just misunderstanding. Like, I just don't know. Or maybe it's not really, maybe I'm not really understanding the situation correctly. Another thing that we might do is we might create or retreat into theology that allows us to explain away what is happening. And so that might be theology that says that, God plans everything that happens in the world meticulously and has a plan, and it's all for the good. And so I don't have to feel what I feel. Or we might say, well, God, he is so good and he's so good, loving, that this suffering has absolutely nothing to do with him. He's very hands off. And he's just like not involved at all. And so I don't have to feel like it's coming from him. And that makes me feel comfortable. That makes me feel like whatever pain I'm going through doesn't reflect on him. So my relationship with him is fine. Whatever it is, we're using these theologies basically to anesthetize ourselves to the experience of the pain and suffering. The last one I want to talk about is that we might fawn, right? Like, this is where we placate and we like do things, extra things to appease God or to butter him up, right? Like maybe we'll spend more time praying or more time reading our Bibles, or we'll pray and be like, oh, like, you're so good and you're so wonderful and I love you so much, and you're, whatever, like all these things to kind of hide the fact that that for a moment we let ourselves feel an ugly feeling towards God, right? And we're trying to like make up for that. That's anxious attachment. We are so anxious about being not on good terms with God that we do all these things. The other one says, so the first one said, I need this relationship to be okay. I need to be okay with God. The second one says, I don't need him. And this is where we respond to pain in our relationship with God by either ghosting him or avoiding him. Or maybe we'll have an argument with him in our heads. So where something happens and we decide what his character is, and we like have this whole argument and we come up with this whole narrative for him. And it's just all in our heads. Like he's not involved in the conversation at all. And so this is more of like a removal of myself from the situation. And I experience both. You can have more than one. I have anxiously attached to God, where like I try to make everything okay, but I have also experienced avoidant attachment to God, where I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm done. Like I just remove myself from the equation, or I just decide that he is away. But the thing is that in the first one, in the anxious attachment, we're not showing up as whole people in a relationship with God. And in the avoidant attachment, we're not letting God show up as a whole person in the relationship. Let me put this into like a real world context. So my husband, if he does something that really hurts me and like there is a break in trust, how do I respond to that? Am I going to just pretend that it didn't happen? I might. I think as a newlywed, I did that. Or maybe I'll convince myself that I just am misunderstanding him. Or maybe I will justify it and explain to myself what he must have been thinking. Or maybe I'll fawn, right? And I'll try and like earn his favor without addressing the elephant in the room. Or maybe I will get really hurt by him and I'll shut down and withdraw and not try and reach out towards him, and kind of just decide that I don't really need him and I'm just going to live my own life. And I've definitely done this one with him, which is where I have the argument in my head, right? Like I argue and I'm like, yep, that's what. So I'm mad at him because he did this thing and he did it because of these reasons. And it's because he thinks this about me. And that's it. Like, this is where our relationship is at. This is like all the things. And I've had this whole argument in my head and he hasn't even been present for it. But so that's how I definitely have had moments where I've been both anxiously and avoidantly attached to David. But now we're moving into secure attachment. And if David does something that hurts me, how do I react? Okay, so I get hurt, I get angry, I get sad, and I voice that. I say, "You hurt me." And I have the expectation that he is going to care, first of all, that he hurt me, that he's going to listen and care and pay attention to what I say. And then I have the expectation that he is going to communicate to me that he understands that I was hurt and he understands why I was hurt. And he can even point to I understand why this would specifically hurt you because this in your past and that in your past. I see why you're hurt, right? And then I expect him to explain himself, right? I expect him to explain that first of all, that he knows that what he did was wrong and why he was doing it, what he was thinking. That is what it looks like to show up as two whole people in a relationship, right? Where there's been a break in trust. I have said, "Ouch, you hurt me." And he has had the opportunity to explain himself and to repair and to earn trust back. And that took effort on both sides. I had to let him do that. I had to make myself vulnerable. I had to give him the chance. I had to hope that there was something here worth redeeming, that he might have, he might be worth trying to resolve this conflict with. And he had to humble himself and listen and pay attention and care and be empathetic and repent or do the work of explaining himself and telling me how I misunderstood him or whatever, right? But that rub, that wrestling, that really uncomfortable conflict resolution, right, is necessary in relationships. And the thing that is so beautiful to me is that those are not things that God is like, yeah, we can have disagreements sometimes. God is like, no, that's the whole relationship. That is what I want for us. I want us to not just, okay, a couple of times in your life do that, but I want you to be the people who wrestle with me, who get in there and tell me your thoughts and feelings and get messy and do the hard work of being in a real actual relationship with me. So you know how God calls the Hebrews the people of Israel, right? Which is always so strange to me because of all of the patriarchs. Jacob was kind of the worst one. He was kind of a mess, right? Wouldn't it make more sense to name the people after Abraham or to name them after Joseph or Moses or Noah? There was just better options. Why Jacob? Jacob's a disaster area. But do you know why? Why are they called Israel? When does God change Jacob's name to Israel? It's when Jacob wrestles with God. And the name Israel literally means to wrestle. So God gives the people of the Hebrews, his chosen people, who are not just Hebrew, it's a mixed multitude of people. The thing that connects all of them is that they wrestle with God. That's the thing. It's not that they're biologically Abraham's children. It's not, that they were born in a particular place or have a particular skin color. The thing that unifies all of these people, they're no longer called Hebrews because they're not all just genetically Hebrew. They're called Israelites because they are the people who wrestle with God. And that's what faith looks like. Faith looks like wrestling with God. So all of these things that our religious backgrounds have taught us are dangerous and to treat with suspicion and might even be sin, like emotions and differentiation and interdependence. And what were the other things I said? conflict and repair and being able to make mistakes and showing up with individual freedom, right? These things are not just allowed, they are fundamental necessities for being in relationship with God, for pursuing God in faith. This is what he wants from us. This is the kind of relationship he wants from us. So let's go through that list one more time. He wants us to show up with all of our emotions. He wants us to differentiate. We're going to talk next about, in another week, about voice. And this is going to be a lot about differentiation. So just hold your hats for that one. He wants us to have conflict with him and to repair, and he's willing to be the one who has to do the repairing to earn our trust back. He's willing to do that. Interdependence. He does not put all of the weight on us to take care of his emotions and to take care of his, to get in line with his thoughts and feelings and to just conform to him. He allows us to, gosh, have you read the Bible? To fail so much and to get it wrong so often. And sometimes for that to actually be like okay and like part of the plan, not the plan, but like be like a good thing, right? Okay. Okay, so I just want to take us back to the story of Zelophehad's daughters, right? Because they were really hurt. God went through all this effort to give the people of Israel, the people who wrestle with God, this law, and he looked out for everyone. He noticed and saw the needs of everyone except them. They, I can only imagine, were angry and hurt and brokenhearted because God didn't see and care for them. Now, I don't think that's actually true, but that's undoubtedly how they felt. But what did they do? Did they decide that God doesn't love them? Did they decide that God doesn't value women? Did they decide that, they have this conversation in their head without him? Did they anxiously be like, oh, well, I guess this must be the plan and we need to get on board and I'm going to pretend that I don't have a problem with it. And, I'm going to repress my feelings, or I'm going to justify God's actions, or I'm going to gaslight myself about it, right? No, they went to him and they said, you made a mistake. And he's like, you're right. I did make a mistake. And he listened to them. And honestly, I think that he did see them before, like he could have made the law perfect the first time around, right? But I think he wanted to give women a voice. These women became lawmakers. They got to influence policy. They got to, none of their male peers, they weren't male peers, none of the men in their country would allow them to have, at that time, would have allowed them to have a voice and influence the way the country was designed. But God opened the door and invited them to partner with him in creating policy for women in the country. And they got it, and they understood the heart of God, and they trusted the heart of God, that he did care for women, that he did value women, that he did want what was best for them. And together, these 5 young women and God designed a policy that created a paradise for women, that freed them from the oppression of being financially tied to men, gave them financial independence and freedom, made them landowners, made it so that they don't have to marry a jerk just so they can survive and feed themselves, right? They get to decide who they want to marry. They don't have to marry at all if they don't want to now under this new law. And God could have just done that. He could have just made that a gift for women, but he valued women enough to invite them into doing that with him. And they trusted him enough to do that and to go to him. Yeah, it's just one of my favorite passages because sometimes I think it's easy to look at God's sovereignty and see it as sadistic. And I have absolutely, I mean, I get it. I really do. I'm not in any way faulting people for interpreting it that way. But I think this was the first passage where I started to see the playfulness of God. Like, he knew, he knew. He knew that those women needed to be property owners and needed to be financially free of, from men, right? And he also knew that they could do it themselves. Like they could design a good law and he wanted them to do it. And so he didn't do it himself so that they would get angry and they would do something about it. It's this like, I don't know, this like loving, knowing, kind, gracious, playful, like friendly, like being a friend who sees and knows and like, I don't know. I just think it's really beautiful. Okay. So that's the end of this week. And I look forward to talking to you guys on Zoom. And I'm super excited about next week's lesson.